My phone rings in the middle of the night, and some stranger starts yelling at me saying I've been evicted. I'm like, what? I just moved in 3 weeks ago, signed the papers, paid the down payment, and now this random voice is telling me to get out. It's the HOA president, and she's not joking. Alright, let me take you back a bit. Rachel and I had been looking for the perfect place for ages. It wasn't just about the house, it was about a fresh start. We'd been renting for years, bouncing around from one overpriced apartment to the next, and honestly, I was getting tired of it. You know how it is. You work hard, save, and you start dreaming of that place that's yours. A place where you can paint the walls whatever color you want, leave a bowl of cereal out overnight, and not have someone come knock on your door complaining about the mess. You want that stability, right? So when we finally found Oakwood Bluffs, it felt like we hit the jackpot. It wasn't some big flashy neighborhood with fancy gates and private golf courses, but it had a nice, cozy feel. Quiet streets, families out walking their dogs, kids riding bikes in the cul-de-sac. We could picture ourselves there, actually live there, not just survive in some cramped space. The house was perfect for us. Nothing too fancy, but enough room to grow into. The kind of house you could call home, no question about it. I'll be honest, buying it wasn't easy. The down payment felt like I was handing over my soul, but I was ready. Rachel was on board, and it was a huge relief when we finally signed all the papers and got the keys. The deal was done, and for once, we weren't just paying off someone else's property. It was ours. I remember the first night we spent there, the boxes still scattered around the living room, but we just sat on the couch, looked around, and soaked it all in. There was something about it, a feeling of freedom, like we had finally made it. And then the HOA came into the picture. I didn't think much about it at first. Everyone talks about their HOA, right? The rules, the regulations, the usual keep your lawn mowed stuff. I filled out the paperwork as soon as we moved in, emailed over all the forms, registered with them like you're supposed to. I figured it was just another box to tick, another welcome to the neighborhood formality. I didn't expect them to be breathing down my neck about everything from the moment I stepped foot in that house. But that night, well, it's like everything I thought I knew about Oakwood Bluffs came crashing down. I never imagined that phone call would lead to this whole mess. The first red flag came a few days after we moved in. I was still unpacking, trying to get the house in order. Rachel was sorting through the kitchen, and I was elbow deep in boxes in the living room when I got an email. It was from the HOA office, and I just figured it was some generic welcome note or, something about the neighborhood rules. I wasn't expecting anything weird, but then I opened it. The subject line said, unauthorized occupancy of property, and my heart literally skipped a beat. I thought maybe it was some sort of mistake. I mean, how could there be any confusion? I owned the place, signed the contract, got the deed. But apparently the HOA president, Loretta, had an issue with it. She claimed I hadn't received official occupancy approval from the board. She wanted to know why I was illegally occupying the house. I read it again, thinking maybe I missed something. But nope, it was clear as day. She was telling me that I didn't belong there. And get this, she was giving me 24 hours to vacate the property. Now, I'm not one to jump to conclusions, but that kind of stuff just doesn't sit right with me. I figured it had to be a mistake. Maybe some paperwork mix-up. I hadn't even met this Loretta person yet, and here she was, accusing me of something completely ridiculous. So I did what anyone would do. I picked up the phone and called the HOA office. No response. And I was a bit frustrated, but figured I'd get it sorted out in the morning. I fired off a quick reply, asking for clarification, and went back to unpacking. But then I got another email. This time, it was a little more forceful. Loretta said she was notified by the board that I had failed to comply with regulations, and if I didn't vacate the house within the next 24 hours, they'd involve law enforcement. Law enforcement? Over some paperwork? That's when my gut told me this was no small misunderstanding. Something wasn't right. So I shot back a response saying that I was the owner of the house, I had all the documents to prove it, and if there was any issue, it was on them to fix it. I attached a copy of my closing papers and deed for good measure. I figured that'd be the end of it, right? Wrong. I didn't hear anything back the next day, but honestly, I didn't think much of it. That's when I decided to go over to the HOA office the following morning, get face-to-face with whoever was in charge, and sort this out. I wasn't expecting anything crazy, I just thought they'd look over the documents, apologize for the confusion, and be done with it. But when I walked in, Loretta was standing right behind the counter. She didn't even introduce herself, just gave me this cold, tight smile and told me I hadn't been approved to live there. She didn't even look at the paperwork I handed her, just brushed it off like it didn't matter. That's when I realized this wasn't about some paperwork mix-up. This was about power. and Loretta wasn't backing down. At that moment, I knew I had to watch my back. I wasn't dealing with some harmless neighborhood association. This woman, this HOA, had a lot more control than I had bargained for. That's when the tension really started to settle in. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. Something far worse was coming. After the meeting at the HOA office, things just got weird. I thought we'd cleared it up. Loretta had been dismissive, sure, but I figured I'd just get back to the normal rhythm of life. I'd been feeling pretty confident that this was all just some kind of misunderstanding, an overzealous president who wasn't thinking straight. But then everything changed. I was sitting on the couch one evening, Rachel was in the kitchen making dinner, and I was flipping through some paperwork, just trying to relax. That's when the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I thought it might be some telemarketer or one of those scam calls, so I almost didn't pick up. But something told me to answer. It was Loretta again. She didn't waste time with pleasantries, she just launched straight into it. She said I was still violating the HOA rules, that the board had met again, and they had unanimously voted to rescind my occupancy approval. They were giving me 48 hours to vacate the house. I thought I was hearing things. I actually had to ask her to repeat herself. She said it like it was nothing, like telling someone to get out of their house was a normal Tuesday for her. I tried to stay calm, but I was already feeling my blood start to boil. "Wait a second," I said. "You can't just kick me out. I've got the deed. I've got everything in order. This is my house." But she wasn't hearing it. She just kept repeating that the board had voted and that I needed to leave or they'd get the police involved. The police, over a house I owned. I tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't listen. It wasn't just about rules or bylaws anymore. It felt like she was out to get me. Like I was some kind of target in her little power play. I hung up before I lost it completely, but I knew things weren't just going to go away. The next morning, when I went to the mailbox, there was a notice, a big orange one plastered right on my front door. It was from the HOA. The heading read, "Official Notice of Unauthorized Occupancy," basically a legal threat to vacate or face consequences. They also slapped another violation on me, claiming I'd somehow failed to comply with one of their imaginary rules. I just stood there for a second, staring at the paper. I was trying to wrap my head around it. The more I looked at it, the more I realized this wasn't just a couple of people making bad decisions. The whole damn board was involved. This was organized. That's when I knew for sure they weren't going to back down. I thought about calling my lawyer, but I knew I had to get ahead of this. I couldn't just keep fighting them off with paperwork and emails. I had to make a stand. But I also knew it was only going to get worse before it got better. Sure enough, it didn't take long for them to escalate again. This time, it wasn't just some paper threat or a phone call. They went after my parking spot. I kid you not, the HOA decided to pull my parking privileges. The parking spots on my street are assigned, and suddenly my spot was officially no longer mine. The thing is, they didn't just tell me I couldn't park there. Oh no, they had one of their people put a little orange sticker on my car, basically a ticket that said I was violating HOA rules and had to move. I was so done at this point, I called up the county sheriff's office and filed a report. This was harassment, plain and simple. I had a right to park in front of my house, right? This wasn't just petty. They were trying to break me down. Rachel was freaking out by this point. She kept saying, "We need to do something about this. This is getting way out of hand." I could see it too. Loretta wasn't just some frustrated neighbor anymore. She was a bully with a system behind her, and she was using it to squeeze me out. I knew this wasn't just a fight about parking or paperwork anymore. It was about power. About proving that they could push me around, get me to bend, and I wasn't going to let them. But the more I stood up for myself, the more aggressive they got. I could feel it. Every time I thought we'd hit a wall, they found a way to take it a step further. It was like they had nothing to lose. And me? I felt like I was getting sucked into their nightmare. I started losing sleep, stressing over every call, every letter, every notice. I didn't know what they'd do next, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to be pretty. At this point, things were getting out of hand, and I knew I had to take action. I wasn't the kind of guy to just let things spiral without trying to fix it, so I figured the best approach was to go the legal route. I wasn't looking for a fight, I was just trying to get back to normal. I wanted to put an end to this madness and move on with my life. I reached out to my real estate attorney, Teresa Goodwin. She was a no-nonsense type of lawyer, the kind who didn't sugarcoat things. I explained everything to her, the phone calls, the parking issues, the eviction threats, and she immediately got to work. She laughed at the absurdity of it, which made me feel a little better. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. She told me, "They can't do this. They have zero legal standing to kick you out of your own house, especially over some made-up rule. This is harassment. She had a point. In the back of my mind, I knew the HOA was overstepping. They couldn't just throw me out without a court order, but the longer this dragged on, the more I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. Still, I wasn't ready to just roll over. Teresa suggested I send a formal cease and desist letter, documenting everything that had happened up to that point. I agreed. I wanted to play this by the book, stay professional, and show them I wasn't some easy target. I also made a call to the police to file a harassment report. Deputy Harrison, the same officer who had helped me when they tried to tow my car, was incredibly helpful. He was on the phone with me for a while, making sure I knew my rights. He told me, HOA can't just tell you to leave like that. They can't cut off your utilities, they can't revoke your parking spot, and they can't evict you at 3 a.m. without a court order. This is overreach, plain and simple. I felt a little better, but I knew this was only the beginning. I also tried reaching out to Loretta directly. I figured I should at least try to talk to her before things got worse. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't entirely as unreasonable as I thought. So I sent her a calm, polite email. I explained that I was the rightful owner of the house and that I had followed all the rules and regulations. I also asked if we could sit down and talk things through, hopefully clear up any misunderstandings. I'll tell you, it felt weird even typing that out. I wasn't begging for her to be nice or anything, but I did want to avoid escalating things further. I thought, maybe she'll see reason if I'm polite. Maybe she just doesn't know who I am, what I'm about. Of course, she didn't respond. Not a word. I sent another email, this time with a little more urgency. I made sure to mention that I was consulting with my attorney and that I would be taking further action if we couldn't resolve things amicably. Still nothing. By this point, I started to get the feeling that Loretta wasn't about to back down, no matter how much I tried to be reasonable. The straw that really broke the camel's back came when I tried one more time. This time with the neighbors. Maybe if I could get the support of the people around me, I could make this whole thing go away. I wasn't asking for much. I just wanted people to see what was happening and speak up. I went over to Kip's house across the street. He'd been a bit distant with me ever since all the drama started, but he had to know what was going on. He'd been living in the neighborhood forever, and I figured if anyone knew how to handle the HOA, it was him. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, I could tell he was already on edge. He looked at me like he knew what I was going to say. "I'm sure you've heard about the mess with the HOA," I said, trying to keep it casual. Kip didn't waste time. He let out a long sigh and said, "Yeah, I've heard. Loretta's been after a lot of the new people. I didn't want to get involved, but you're not the first person she's done this to." That stopped me cold. "Wait, what? You mean this has happened before?" He nodded. "A couple of people tried to fight her on stuff. The last guy had some issues with overdue dues or something. But it wasn't just about that. She's got some kind of power trip going. Trust me, man, you're not the first, and you won't be the last." I couldn't believe it. The more Kip talked, the more it sounded like Loretta was running her own little fiefdom, using her position as HOA president to control and intimidate anyone who didn't fall in line. "Look, I don't want to make things worse for you," Kip continued, "but if you need anything, you let me know. She's been on a rampage lately. You're not crazy, just get a lawyer involved. People here don't like the way she's running things." His words were comforting in a way, but also infuriating. I wasn't the only one being bullied by this woman, but that didn't make it any easier to swallow. After that, I did what I should have done in the first place. I contacted an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. He was a bit of a bulldog, a guy who had fought the same fight many times before. His first piece of advice? Document everything. Emails, letters, phone calls, photos, every interaction. Get every single detail. The more we have, the better chance we have of winning. At that point, I felt like I was already drowning in paperwork and legal jargon, but I was willing to do whatever it took. I wasn't going to let Loretta take my house, not without a fight. So I pushed forward. I filed formal complaints, sent more letters, and called the HOA office several times, but all I got was the same cold treatment. No answers, no apologies, just more resistance. It was becoming pretty clear. Peace wasn't an option, not anymore. So there I was, still fighting to keep my house, but with every passing day, it felt like the walls were closing in. Loretta and her little HOA crew weren't backing off, and every legal move I made just seemed to be met with a wall of silence, or even more resistance. I had this sinking feeling that this wasn't going to end well, that I was going to lose, no matter how hard I tried. Then came the twist. It was late one evening, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of the next steps. I had just gotten off the phone with my lawyer, and he was telling me that the chances of getting a quick resolution were slim. The whole situation was starting to feel like quicksand. The more I struggled, the deeper I was sinking. I was staring at the pile of documents on the table, wondering if it was worth continuing. I mean, at this point, my life was consumed by this stupid HOA fight. My stress levels were through the roof. Rachel was getting fed up with the constant tension, and the worst part was that Loretta seemed to be winning. At least that's how it felt. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I figured it was probably some kind of junk call. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Maybe it was that small voice in the back of my head telling me to pay attention, or maybe I was just hoping for some kind of breakthrough even though I didn't really believe one was coming. I picked up the phone. "Hello? Is this Alex?" a voice on the other end asked. It was a man, kind of rough around the edges, but he didn't sound like a telemarketer. "Yeah, who's this?" I asked, still half expecting it to be some scam artist. "Name's Kip," he said, and my heart skipped. Kip, my neighbor, the one who had mentioned Loretta's past behavior. "I've got something you need to hear," he said, his voice low, like he was looking over his shoulder. All right, what's going on?" There was a long pause, and then he dropped the bomb. "Loretta's up to something, big time, and you need to know about it." I felt a knot form in my stomach. My mind was racing. What now? What could she possibly be doing behind the scenes? "She's not just messing with you, she's been covering her tracks, and I think I've got the proof you need." I could barely process what he was saying. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I just wanted to know what the hell he was talking about. "I'm listening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though my brain was already jumping to a million conclusions. "Look," Kip said, "I've been hearing things. People have been talking. She's been running a side hustle. You know how she's always so into the HOA business, right? Well, turns out she's using her position to cover up some, let's call it shady stuff." "Shady stuff?" I repeated, barely able to keep up. "Yeah, financial stuff. She's embezzling from the HOA funds. The money you've been paying in dues, it's going straight into her pocket." I felt the ground beneath me shift. This wasn't just a power struggle, this was criminal. I don't have all the details yet, but I've got enough to know she's been siphoning off HOA funds for months. It's all going into an account she's been hiding. I don't know if she's been doing this to everyone, or if it's just been people like you, the new guys who don't know what's going on. But I'm pretty damn sure she's been using this to pay for her pet projects that never even show up. My head was spinning. The first thing that came to mind was the playground that was supposed to be getting new equipment, but never did. The streetlights that kept flickering on and off. The piles of money that were supposed to be used for neighborhood improvements, but were clearly not being used for anything. "She's been stealing money," I said, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. Kip sighed. "Yeah, and it's worse than you think. I don't have all the proof, but I've been keeping track of some of the shady stuff she's been doing. I've got a couple of documents that might help you. If you want to go after her, you need to get your hands on this stuff. It's your best shot." I couldn't believe it. Loretta wasn't just being a petty tyrant. She was straight up committing crimes, hiding it under the guise of HOA business, using her power to fill her pockets with money that should have gone to the community, and now, suddenly, I had the chance to prove it. "I need that stuff," I said, my voice steady now, my mind running through all the possible ways to take her down. "Can you send it to me?" Kip paused. "It's not going to be easy. I'm not handing it over just like that, but I'll meet you tomorrow night. Come to my place. I'll show you everything I've got." I agreed, hanging up the phone with my head spinning. This was it. This was the break I needed. Loretta thought she had me cornered, but I wasn't about to let her get away with this. The next night, I met Kip at his house, and he handed me a folder. Inside were documents, bank statements, HOA financial records, and a bunch of emails between Loretta and various contractors. The numbers didn't add up. There were payments going to a company that didn't exist anymore, strange charges for work that had never been completed, and a trail of cash that led straight to Loretta. I stared at the papers, my heart racing. This was it, the proof I needed to bring her down. Loretta had no idea what was coming. The documents Kip gave me were a game changer. As soon as I saw the evidence, I knew this was no longer just about me standing up to a petty HOA president. This was about exposing corruption, about taking down a woman who thought she could get away with running a scam because she held the power. I felt this fire light up inside me, a kind of clarity I hadn't felt before. But I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. I had the proof now, but I had to play it smart. I couldn't just throw these documents out there without a solid plan. Loretta wasn't going to give up easily. She was dangerous, and she had the entire board in her pocket. I had to outsmart her. I didn't sleep much that night. I spent hours staring at the evidence, laying out the documents in front of me, connecting the dots. The more I looked at them, the clearer it became. Loretta had been skimming HOA funds for months, if not longer. There were payments to contractors who never did any work, deposits that didn't make sense, and these weird little financial blips that, if anyone looked closely, could trace back to her. The first step was obvious. I had to get my lawyer, Teresa, involved. She was the one who'd been there with me from the start, and now it was time to really hit this thing head on. I called her up and explained what I'd found. I could hear the surprise in her voice when she understood the gravity of it. "This is bigger than I thought," she said after a long pause. "You've got enough here to make a serious case, but we need to be careful. Loretta's not stupid. She's been running this show for too long." "Tell me about it," I muttered, "but this stops now. I'm not backing down." Teresa's voice softened. "I'm with you. We need to hit her where it hurts, in the wallet and in her reputation. The HOA board is going to back her up, but once we start digging, the public's going to see what's been going on." That was the key, the public. This wasn't just a legal fight anymore, it was a fight for transparency. I wasn't going to just win in court. I needed the whole community to know what Loretta had been doing. I needed the other homeowners to see the truth. The more people who understood what she'd been up to, the harder it would be for her to cover it up. The next thing I did was pull together a list of people who might be on my side. If I could get just a handful of neighbors to stand with me, we could start building momentum. The more voices we had, the harder it would be for Loretta to intimidate anyone. Kip was the first person I turned to. He already knew the situation better than anyone, and he wasn't afraid of speaking out. I went over to his house the next day and showed him the evidence. He looked through it, his face growing more serious with every page. By the time he was done, he didn't say much, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. "You're right," he said finally. "This is big. I've heard whispers about Loretta for years, but this is criminal." "I need your help, Kip," I said, feeling the weight of the moment. "We need to take this to the neighbors, but we've got to do it right. We can't just show up at someone's door with these papers. They'll dismiss us if we do that." Kip nodded. "I get it. We need a plan. I'll talk to a few people I know, ones who've had enough of her but are too scared to do anything about it. If we can get some of them on our side, we can make a real push." We agreed to meet up again in a couple of days, but I wasn't about to wait around. I had to get the ball rolling as quickly as possible. I reached out to Teresa again, and we started drafting a formal letter. The idea was to send it to every homeowner in the neighborhood, letting them know that I had proof of corruption in the HOA and asking for their support. It couldn't just be an accusation. I had to lay it out clearly, with the documents and the evidence, so they'd understand the seriousness of what was going on. "We'll send it certified," Teresa advised. "That way, we'll know exactly who got it, and if we end up in court, we'll have a record." I liked the sound of that. There was something incredibly satisfying about thinking of Loretta's smug face when she realized the whole neighborhood knew her dirty secrets. The next few days were a blur of planning. I printed out the letters, got them ready to send, and worked with Kip to talk to a few of the more vocal neighbors. He wasn't kidding when he said people were fed up. I wasn't the only one who had noticed Loretta's power trip. People had been quietly talking behind closed doors, but no one had ever had the courage to stand up to her. By the time we were ready to send out the letters, we had a small group of people on our side. Kip was one of them, and there were a few others who had agreed to back me up. It wasn't a huge group, but it was a start. We had enough to get the ball rolling and make things difficult for Loretta. I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I was on offense. It felt like the scales were starting to tip in my favor. I had the truth on my side, and now it was time to let the world know. I sat back for a moment, looking at everything we'd put together. I could feel the weight of what was coming. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be quick. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a real shot. Loretta might have been calling the shots up until now, but the next move was mine. The moment we sent out those letters, I could feel the shift. It was like the calm before the storm, that strange, quiet tension in the air. I knew things were about to get ugly, but I wasn't backing down. Not now, not when we were finally fighting back, not when I had the upper hand for once. But Loretta wasn't about to let this slide without a fight. I didn't hear from her right away, but I did hear from some of the neighbors. Some were nervous, saying they didn't want to get involved, worried about the backlash. Others were cautiously supportive, but I could tell they were waiting to see which way the wind blew before they fully committed. I couldn't blame them. Loretta had spent years keeping everyone in line with her threats and tactics. I knew I was asking a lot of people to risk their own peace for this fight. Then, a few days later, I got the first real sign that Loretta had noticed what was going on. It was another email, but this time it wasn't just her usual empty threats. No, this time she was pissed. The subject line was simple: cease and desist. I opened it, and there it was, in black and white. She was threatening to sue me for slander, accusing me of spreading false information about her and the HOA. She claimed I was harassing her and attempting to damage the reputation of the community. I had to laugh. This was the woman who had tried to evict me in the middle of the night and had been siphoning money from the HOA for who knows how long, and now she was acting like I was the one who was out of line. I didn't even need to call Teresa for this one. I knew exactly what to do. First, I saved the email for evidence. Second, I didn't respond to her threats directly. I wanted to keep things professional, avoid giving her any reason to escalate things further. But I wasn't going to stay quiet either. I had the community backing me now, and I wasn't about to let Loretta get away with pretending like she was the victim. I called Teresa to get her opinion on Loretta's little threat. We both agreed it was just a last-ditch attempt to intimidate me. But Teresa made an important point. Don't underestimate her. This is the moment she's going to try and flip the script. She'll play the victim to the community and paint you as the villain. That hit me. Loretta wasn't just trying to push me out of my house. She was trying to control the narrative, make herself the martyr, the misunderstood leader who was just doing her job. I had to make sure I controlled the narrative instead. That's when I realized I needed to go public with everything. I couldn't just rely on the few neighbors who were on my side. I needed to make sure the entire community saw who Loretta really was. I had to show them the truth, the embezzlement, the lies, the manipulation. If I was going to win this, I had to take the fight straight to her doorstep, figuratively and literally. The next step was getting everyone together. I called a meeting, a neighborhood gathering, nothing official, just a bunch of people coming together in one place to talk things through. We needed to get the word out, gather support, and make sure Loretta knew we were done being afraid of her. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about all of us. I reached out to Kip first. He was in, of course. He'd already been talking to people around the neighborhood, and he knew who to approach. We needed a mix of people, some who were vocal and brave enough to stand up to Loretta, and others who had more influence in the neighborhood, people who'd be able to help sway the crowd. We got the ball rolling, and the meeting was set for a weekend. I didn't know if Loretta knew about it yet, but I had a feeling she'd find out soon enough. The night before the meeting, my nerves were shot. I'd been living with this constant feeling of unease for weeks now, and tomorrow was the day everything would either fall apart or start coming together. The meeting was at the community park, a place where the HOA had no control over the scheduling. We kept it casual, no flashy signs, no protests, just an informal get-together. The idea was to have a conversation, to show people that standing up to Loretta wasn't some wild, reckless move. It was the right thing to do. The turnout was better than I expected. More than 30 people showed up. Some were there out of curiosity, others because they were genuinely fed up with Loretta and the way she had been running things. Kip did a great job of rallying support, and by the time I stood up to speak, I felt a surge of confidence I hadn't had in weeks. I started slow, just talking about the reasons why I felt compelled to stand up, about the shady stuff I'd discovered, and the importance of fighting for the community's well-being. I didn't get too deep into the details of the embezzlement yet. I knew that'd come later. But the more I spoke, the more people began to nod in agreement. They wanted change. They wanted someone to finally take Loretta down a peg. Then I dropped the bombshell. I pulled out the documents, the financial records, the emails, the payments to non-existent contractors. I didn't have to say much. I let the evidence speak for itself. There was an audible gasp from the crowd. I could see people shifting uncomfortably, exchanging glances. I knew some of them had heard rumors, but now they had proof. They couldn't deny it anymore. Loretta wasn't just a bad leader, she was a criminal. By the time I finished, the room was buzzing. The energy had shifted, and I could feel the weight of the moment. People were talking, organizing. They were ready to take action. And that was when Loretta's game of intimidation really backfired. She showed up. Of course she did. She walked into the park, eyes blazing, flanked by a few board members trying to act like she owned the place. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there glaring at me. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. I wasn't afraid anymore. When Loretta walked in, her heels clicking on the pavement like she was strolling through a courtroom, I could feel the shift in the air. The energy of the crowd changed in an instant. It was like the whole park paused. Some people stood straighter, some backed away a little, but most just stared at her like she was some kind of intruder, because that's exactly what she was. An intruder, not just in the park, but in our lives, and we weren't going to let her walk all over us anymore. She had that same smug look she always had, like she was untouchable, but this time it was different. The smugness in her face faltered just a little as she looked around. She could tell the crowd wasn't on her side anymore. The people were talking, they were whispering, and their whispers were getting louder by the second. She opened her mouth to say something, probably to lecture us, to throw out more empty threats, but I didn't give her the chance. I stepped forward, the papers in my hand still warm from the printer. I looked at Loretta, holding her gaze, and then I turned to the crowd. I had their attention now, and I wasn't about to waste it. I laid out everything. The documents, the bank records, the contractors who didn't exist. I showed them what I had, and I watched the room react as they saw the truth for the first time. Loretta's face went pale. I saw her take a sharp breath, like she was trying to catch herself. She tried to speak, but I didn't let her. "Loretta, you've been running this HOA like it's your personal piggy bank," I said, my voice louder than I thought it would be. "You've been lying to everyone here, pocketing money that was meant for our neighborhood, money that should have been spent on our playground, on our streets, on things that actually matter. You've been pretending to be a leader, but the truth is, you've been stealing from us, and I'm not the only one who's noticed." The people around me were getting louder now, murmurs turning into full conversations. Eyes were wide, some in disbelief, others in anger. I could hear people asking each other, "Is this for real?" and "How long has this been going on?" But Loretta? She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, trying to compose herself, her eyes narrowing as she realized she wasn't in control anymore. It was like she thought she could scare everyone back into silence, but there was no silence to return to. I stepped closer, keeping my voice calm, but my words sharp. "This isn't just about me. This is about all of us. Every single person here. The money that's supposed to be used for us, the homeowners, has been funneled into your pockets while you've kept us in the dark. We've been paying for a playground that doesn't exist, for streetlights that barely work, and for security that's nothing but a facade. This isn't just negligence, Loretta. This is theft. And now we all know." I let the silence hang in the air for a moment, watching her face twist with frustration. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready for people to know what she had been hiding for so long. She finally opened her mouth to respond, but this time the crowd wasn't having it. A few of the neighbors, the ones I'd spoken to, the ones who were brave enough to stand with me, spoke up, cutting her off. "Loretta, you need to step down. Now," one of them, Marisol, said. Marisol had been quietly supporting me from the sidelines, and hearing her speak up like that was like the final nail in Loretta's coffin. "Enough of this. We're done with the lies," said Kip, standing at my side. He had that calm, steady tone he always used when he meant business. "If you think you can keep running this HOA like it's your personal cash cow, you're dead wrong." There were more voices after that, a few familiar faces, a few people who had been too afraid to speak up before, but now they were voicing their frustrations, their anger. They were all done being afraid of her. I could see Loretta's world crumbling in front of her. She wasn't a leader anymore. She was just a woman who had been caught red-handed. She tried to gather herself, but it was too late. The truth had already spread, and the damage was done. But it wasn't just Loretta who was in trouble now. The HOA board, the ones who had been protecting her for so long, were also starting to feel the heat. They knew what was coming. They were part of this mess, and now they had nowhere to hide. Loretta opened her mouth again, but I didn't let her speak. "You can say whatever you want, but we've already seen who you really are," I said. "And we're done with your reign. You've been using fear and manipulation to control us, but those days are over." At that moment, someone from the back of the crowd shouted, "We're calling a recall." That was all it took. The rest of the crowd erupted in support, chanting, "Recall! Recall!" The energy in the park was electric now. The people were awake, and they were ready for change. Loretta's face was a picture of pure rage. She glared at me like she wanted to tear me apart, but she was powerless. She couldn't stop what was happening. This wasn't just about the HOA anymore. It was about the people taking back control of their own community. That's when I saw it, the moment she realized she was done. She turned on her heel, pushing through the crowd, her face red with fury. She didn't say another word. She didn't have to. Her exit said everything. As the crowd started to break up, people were talking, shaking their heads, making plans. I could hear whispers about how they were going to vote for the recall, about how they were going to get involved and make sure this kind of thing never happened again. It was like the neighborhood had woken up from a long sleep, and suddenly they were ready to take charge. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift. Loretta's power had been exposed for what it was, a bluff, and now the people were standing with me. I wasn't alone anymore. The fight wasn't over yet, but the battle had already been won. Loretta might have thought she was untouchable, but the truth had a way of breaking through, and I was ready for whatever came next. You know, looking back at everything, it almost feels surreal. I mean, at the time, it felt like I was in the middle of a storm, fighting tooth and nail for my house, my community, my sanity. But now it's just calm, quiet, almost peaceful. Loretta's gone, the board's been overhauled, and the whole neighborhood is different. Not just the HOA, but the vibe. It's like we've all been holding our breath for years, and now we can finally exhale. People are actually talking to each other again. They're helping each other out. Neighbors who used to stay behind their fences are coming out and chatting on the front lawns. It's like the whole place has come alive again, and I'm not sure I even realized how much we'd all been in a kind of fog until it lifted. As for me, I'm still here, still in the house I fought so damn hard for. It's funny, you know? At first, I couldn't imagine living here without that constant weight hanging over me. Every morning, I'd wake up and expect some new letter from the HOA or another phone call from Loretta. But now, every morning feels like a little victory. I walk out onto the front porch with a cup of coffee in my hand, and the world feels normal again. Rachel and I have talked about it a lot. She says I've changed, not in some big dramatic way, but in a subtle, important way. I used to think I could just go with the flow, let the small stuff slide, avoid confrontation at all costs. But after everything with Loretta and the HOA, I've realized something. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right. You can't just sit back and hope things will get better on their own. You've got to stand up, even when it feels like the whole system is stacked against you. The thing is, I'm not angry anymore. Sure, there are days when I think about everything that happened. The sleepless nights, the constant tension, the feeling that I was fighting a losing battle. But anger's not the emotion I hold on to. I think what stuck with me more is the feeling of relief, the knowledge that the community is in a better place now, that the people who were too afraid to speak up are finally able to take a stand, and they know they're not alone. I still remember that day at the park, the way the crowd turned from a collection of individuals into something stronger, something unified. It was more than just a fight for my house. It was a fight for all of us. A fight for the community we were supposed to be, for the kind of place we wanted to live in, and seeing those neighbors, some of whom I barely knew, stand up and fight for what was right. It gave me hope. It made me proud to be part of something bigger than just my own backyard. There are still hiccups, of course. Nothing's perfect. The new board's still getting their feet under them, and there's a bit of back and forth over how to rebuild after everything that happened. But honestly, it's nothing compared to what we went through with Loretta. Now, the decisions are being made for the right reasons, for the good of the neighborhood, not just for one person's ego or their wallet. As for Loretta, well, I'm not sure where she ended up. I don't really care, to be honest. She's not part of this story anymore. She's in the past, where she belongs. She tried to break us, tried to tear apart the community we'd built, but she failed. The thing about people like her is they can't keep control forever. The truth always comes out. It's just a matter of time. Now, when I look at the house, at the one I almost lost, I think about how much it really means to me. Not just because of the walls or the roof, but because of the journey it took to get here. Every room in that house feels like a symbol of something bigger. It's not just a house. It's the place where I learned what I'm made of. The place where I learned how to fight for what matters. Things aren't perfect. Life's never perfect. The gutters still clog and the lawn needs trimming every now and then. But when I sit out on the porch at night, sipping my beer, watching the sunset, I can't help but smile. I'm home, I'm safe, and that's enough. I sometimes think back to those first days when Loretta started messing with me, when I thought I was alone in all of this. It feels like a lifetime ago now. The thing is, I'm not the same guy I was then. I'm stronger, more confident. I learned that you don't have to back down just because someone tries to push you around. And when you stand your ground, when you fight for the right reasons, people will stand with you. It's funny though, even after everything, I still get that feeling, that little jolt of tension whenever I get a call or an email from the HOA. I'll see the name pop up on my phone, and for just a second, I wonder if it's them trying to mess with me again. But then I remember they can't touch me anymore. I've got the truth on my side, and there's nothing more powerful than that. So yeah, life's back to normal. It's quiet now, but it's a quiet I've earned.